Hi there. Hello. Welcome back to the Pitch Grid. Thank you so much for tuning in once again. We have a busy recap show to get to. Not so much for the EFL, but more so NFL. Lots of big upsets, big games that happened, and seasons that are kind of in the balance now at this point. So let's get right into it. In the EFL, not much really happened because international break. But yeah, the big result that did happen though was Stockport County taking it to Wrexham. They beat the Welsh boys 1-0 at Stockport. Um, Louis Barry, Stockport's prolific striker, scored a 24th minute goal that gave Stockport County the lead, and they scrapped and clawed their way from there, really, to be honest. Um, Barry, of course, having scored 11 goals this year, one of the best scorers in League One so far. Yeah, I mean, Stockport County, the stats kind of tell the story, to be honest. 54% possession in favor of Stockport County to 46% for Wrexham. 19 shot attempts for Stockport County, with 7 of those going on goal. 9 shot attempts for Wrexham, only 1 went on target. 4 yellow cards. 9 corner kicks for Stockport, to only 2 for Wrexham. Yeah, this was a weird game. Just you kind of expected um you kind of expected Wrexham to kind of take this, but also at the same time, like it, this felt like a huge important game for the for Stockport County. They were kind of peeking inside the playoff spots, and now all of a sudden they're right behind Wrexham and Birmingham for automatics, right behind them with Birmingham and Wrexham at second and third with 28 points. Well, Birmingham actually are at Birmingham are at 30, I think. It's like, yeah, the table here, yeah, they're at 30. So Stockport County goes into fifth with this win, which is crazy, honestly. Um, you look at the match ratings here. I mean, it's kind of crazy just looking at. Um, there wasn't like a standout performer really besides Barry. Um, yeah, this is wow. I mean, overall, the player ratings were not good. The highest being a 5.2 for Adaramola um, from Stockport County. Yeah, this is just a weird game, honestly. And um, yeah, Wrexham's backup keeper was in this game as well. Dan Scar, he had 63 passes, 63 minutes to 24 passes. He only had a 3.7 in this match. So it just kind of shows there's a lot of backups in this game. Kind of looks like in some cases. So this is very interesting. And 78% passing accuracy for Stockport County, 74 for Wrexham, 3 offsides for Wrexham as well. Yeah, this just shows Stockport County in a lot of areas really took it to Wrexham in a game that Wrexham really were hoping they could take advantage of the international break, maybe even sneak into second place with it. Yeah, this was a very, I don't know, I kind of, you look at the XG and stuff, you thought coming into this that Wrexham would have potentially had the advantage. Stockport County conceding more and stuff like that. So it's just very interesting looking at these stats, knowing that, coming into this year, Wrexham were considered promotion favorites, and they really haven't acted like it so far. I mean, granted, they've had a lot of injuries, but still, it's kind of weird to see. And that, they still might because, they have the playoffs and all that. But right now, Wickham actually takes the lead, as the lead still in League One coming into the next week play. Going to League Two real quick, Crewe Alexandra had a huge 2-0 win over Notts County to keep themselves in the automatics in League Two. Very good year for Crewe. So far this year, they are right behind Port Vale, who also won and are kind of the story of League Two this year. 33 points, 10 wins, 3 draws, and 3 losses. Very good start to the year for Port Vale. MK Dons also had a huge win over Cheltenham, 3-2 in probably the game of the week in EFL. Cheltenham, not really expected to do much because they were lower table, but they put up a fight, and MK Dons had to sweat it out. But the Dons eventually pulled through. So, yeah, they keep themselves in the playoff positions. So, yeah, that's kind of your EFL brief recap. Let's head gridside for what was a very eventful week of action in the NFL. Eagles on Thursday night got us started with a tasty matchup that had a lot of implications, not only just for the playoffs, but for the division as well. Commanders came into this 7-3. Eagles 7-2. Winner would take first place in the division. And really, the Commanders started out strong. Getting a 7-0 and then a 10-3 lead over the Eagles in the third quarter. It was 10-3 with 11:03 to go in the third. They were Washington, but then Eagles scored 23 unanswered, including 2 Saquon Barkley rushing touchdowns and a Jalen Hurts rushing touchdown with tush push to just absolutely bury the Commanders. And by the time the Commanders scored their final touchdown with only 28 seconds to go, it was way too late. It was 26-18 at that point. That became your final score. Eagles extend their division lead. That was, I think, like half a game. At that point, they are now, they're up by a game and a half. And plus the tiebreaker on Washington for the division. That was. It felt like a very missed opportunity for Washington, to be honest. Jane Daniels, he was 22 of 32 for 191 yards, touchdown and a pick. Meanwhile, Jalen Hurts was 18 of 20 for 221 yards. Brian Robinson, 16 carries for 63 yards and a touchdown. Meanwhile, the only touchdown, second, one of 2 touchdowns of the day for Commanders. And then Saquon Barkley, who was the MVP of the game by far. 26 carries, 146 yards, and 2 touchdowns. This was close to begin with, and then it wasn't. Eagles outgained the Commanders by nearly 200 yards, 434 to 264 total yards. Commanders had the only turnover of the game, which was a Jane Daniels interception. 23 first downs for the Eagles, 18 for the Commanders. Overall, the Eagles did take this game, and it felt comfortable by the end, but it wasn't that easy. The Commanders made it tough, but they just couldn't find enough offense. And, you're not completely worried about the Commanders, even though Daniels has kind of fallen off a bit. If he's a good quarterback, he'll bounce back. He'll be able to see what's wrong. This is going to be his test to see how good he actually is. He had the easy stretch to start the season. Now he's coming up on times where the Commanders need him to help them stay in the playoff hunt. Right now, the Commanders, after that loss, are in the 7th seed in the playoffs, game ahead of the Rams, which we will get to in a little bit. Moving on, we have the Ravens-Steelers game, which was huge. Coming into this game was huge. Again, another division deciding game, potentially. The Ravens came into 7-3. Steelers were 7-2. Both tried to assert their dominance in what is always a very hotly contested rivalry. Usually the case with this game, it was full defense. That proved to be the case this year as well. For the first matchup, Steelers took a 3-0 lead, and besides the Ravens taking a brief lead with a minute 16 to go in the first half, it never felt like it was out of the Steelers' control the entire game. Ravens took a 7-6 lead with a minute 16 to go, and then the Steelers methodically just drive their way out and get a 32-yard field goal from Chris Boswell to make it 9-7 at the half, and they never looked back. Interesting for the Steelers here, they did not score a touchdown the entire game. They had several chances to do so, including a drive where they had it down to, I think, the 5, and then Russell Wilson threw a pick in the back of the end zone that ended the drive effectively. And Lamar, he was held in check for the most part of this game. 16-33, 207 yards, and a touchdown and a pick. Derrick Henry was held in check, 13 carries for 65 yards and a touchdown. And then Najee Harris also was held in check. Both offenses were held in check, really. Steelers did not score touchdowns this entire game. Ravens didn't either until after that second quarter touchdown, until the near deciding part of the game where Zay Flowers it was 18-10 Steelers after a field goal, 3:35 to go. Ravens get the ball, drive down the field. Zay Flowers catches a pass wide open, waltzes into the end zone after breaking a tackle, and makes it 18-16. Ravens then attempt to go for 2 to tie it, and they fail. Pretty bad 2-point call too, if you ask me. And they couldn't get the onside kick, and well, actually they kicked it deep. Interesting call there. And Steelers got the first down and salted the game out. And yeah, this felt like a huge statement win for the Steelers team, with Russell Wilson, being the new quarterback, coming in was very much doubted and not really trusted. He came in a very solid performance overall, besides the interception. Threw for 205 yards, again, no touchdowns for the Steelers in this game. But yeah, this was and for the Ravens, this was kind of a hard loss, really. And takes a hit on their postseason ambitions. As of the playoff hunt right now, they are in the 6th seed. Lamar is still in the MVP discussion, but it sure took a hit on that, his MVP case. And I'm sure, likes of Josh Allen and stuff, maybe Jared Goff actually are gonna take precedent over what was a solid but very forgetful performance for Lamar standards this year. Jags Lions, very quickly we'll go over this. Lions were perfect today in this game. They never ever trailed. Well, they trailed 3-0. After that, they never trailed again. And they scored touchdown in every single possession they had. Just trying these new weird. What is fascinating about this Lions team is they try so many different ways of scoring, really, to be honest. Well, actually, they didn't score a touchdown on every possession. They had a field goal to end their last possession instead of 49 to go. That was the only drive of the game for the Lions that they didn't score a touchdown. They didn't, yeah. They scored on every possession, though. which is crazy to think about. But yeah, this was a very dominant game and showed why the Lions are one of the best teams in the NFL. Jared Goff, had 412 yards of offense. Mac Jones was just 138 yards and a pick. Lions just made sure they couldn't do anything. The Jags. And this might be very well have been Doug Pearson's last game of the year, just because of how bad the Jags have been. Worst loss of the year for the Jags. Um, yeah, this was a bad, ugly game for the Jags, but very good for the Lions overall, except for one thing. They did lose Alex Anzalone, their captain linebacker, who is probably one of the tone setters with that defense. He is out for, I think, 6 to 8 weeks with a broken forearm. So that's definitely going to hurt the Lions in the long run. He'll probably be back, considering Lions have a stranglehold on the 1 seed in the NFC. He'll probably be back for the playoffs when they play again, but it's going to be hard. It's going to be interesting to see how the defense plays out without Alex Anzalone and Aiden Hutchinson. They've lost like 4 stars, I think, down to injury on that defense. So yeah, they're definitely making do with what they have, and they're doing very well with it. But still, it was a tough loss for them to be sure. Otherwise, it was a perfect game for the Lions. Nothing to complain about for them. Rams Patriots was kind of a weird one. Rams came in as pretty comfortable favorites. But the Patriots, for the most part, for the first half, put up a good fight and made a 14-10 Rams at the half. Puka Nacua had a touchdown. Cooper Kupp had a touchdown. By the end of the first half, I think Cooper Kupp took a touchdown in with 14-10 to go in the third. And the Rams after that, just kept the Patriots out of arm's reach. And honestly, that's all they needed to do after a touchdown with 3:30 to go in the third, which made it 28-13. Patriots just couldn't really do much after that. Matthew Stafford had a very good game passing. Overall, he was 18-27, 295 yards, 4 touchdowns. He started rough, but he finished very strong. Drake May had a pretty good performance. Again, he's showing why he's a pretty solid quarterback so far this year. 30 for 40, 282 yards, 2 touchdowns and a pick for Drake May. Kyrie Williams carried the ball 15 carries, 86 yards, and Ramondre Stevenson carried it 20 times for 73 yards for the Patriots. Puka Nacua led the receivers for the Rams, 7 for 123 yards and a touchdown, while Kendrick Bourne led the Patriots receiving with 5 catches for 70 yards and a touchdown. This was a game the Rams needed to win to show they were, they can win against the bad teams as well as the good teams. They've kind of struggled as of late. They've had a couple of weird losses. Losses like to the Dolphins, and had close games with the Seahawks and the Vikings, the Raiders. So to get this kind of a win was good, even if it's not the best looking win. Still, the stats, you look at the stats here, they had 402 yards total to 382 for the Patriots. Patriots had 2 turnovers. Patriots did dominate time of possession, which is interesting. But that's kind of typical considering how the Patriots like to play. But yeah, the Patriots made this more of a game than you would have thought. But still, the Rams' talent did show out, and that's kind of what won them this game with their receiving core, their passing game, which is kind of, I think, not exactly how the Rams want to win, but it's good enough. And even though the Rams have some talent on defense, they still have some ways to go to rebuild it, in my opinion. Saints Browns was actually a 14-14 game at one point. It was 14-14 with 8:49 to go in the third, and then nothing happened until the fourth quarter, where the Saints just scored 3 straight touchdowns and just pulled away from the Browns. And effectively, it pretty much ended the season. Browns are 2-8. I believe that's season over for them. I don't think they're mathematically eliminated, but they might as well be. Taysom Hill was the star of this game. 7 carries for 138 yards and 3 touchdowns. MVS had a great game for the Saints as well, 2 catches, 87 yards and a touchdown. I mean, give Jameis Winston and the Browns credit. They competed for a big stretch of this game, and just the offense couldn't do enough. And eventually the defense broke, and that's what lost them the game. They just couldn't do much offensively. Considering though that Jerry Jeudy had 6 catches for 142 yards and a touchdown, shows that he's probably one of the more important weapons on that offense since Amari Cooper left. You have to think they'll rebuild that offense next year. Both having very identical sets of offensive yards. 473 yards for the Saints, 443 for the Browns. Saints did have 2 turnovers, lost the turnover battle. Barely edged the time of possession battle at 30 minutes and 38 seconds for the Saints and 29 minutes and 22 seconds for the Browns. Browns did have more first downs. This was more even if you look at the stats than what score indicates. But, 3 straight touchdowns just buried the Browns. And the Browns couldn't do anything to respond after that, after the first couple touchdowns, and it just fell over at that point. It really was. So, yeah, I mean, kudos to the Saints. They pick up their 4th win. And they're not exactly out of things yet, I don't think. They are 13th. I mean, it might as well be over in a lot of ways, but it, gives them a little bit of momentum to show that they can win the game. And I think, let's see here, I might be wrong. That's their 2nd straight win. They've beaten the Falcons and now the Browns. So very good job kind of getting a winning streak together, even if it was kind of an ugly winning streak. Colts Saints, this was the Anthony Richardson return game. Returned after being on the bench for 2 weeks. And, this was it was an interesting game, to be honest. It didn't look pretty early for the Colts. They led, well, it did in some ways, and in others it didn't. They led 13-0 at one point. The Jets just stormed back, made it a game, took the lead in the 3rd quarter. Was like only 2 minutes into the 3rd quarter, making 14-13 Jets, and then the Colts took the lead back. It was a back and forth game in the second half. Jets taking the lead, the Colts would take it back. Jets took an 8-point lead with 13:03 to go in the 4th quarter. And then 10:11 to go. Josh Jones got a touchdown pass from Anthony Richardson to make it 24-22. The Colts decided to go for it and fail because of a great defensive play by the Jets. And then the Jets go down and decide to kick a 35-yard field goal with 2:41 to go. And then Anthony Richardson, on his return, with 46 seconds left, gets a go-ahead touchdown to make it 28-27, and that's how the final score ends. It's 28-7 Colts, 28-27 Colts, and honestly, it's a huge win for the Colts. Keeps them very much alive in the playoff hunt. A game back of the Broncos for the 7th seed of the AFC. This is a huge, huge, huge win for the Colts. They need it. It's pretty much almost, I would say, season over for the Jets as they are 3-8. And I don't think they could come back from this unless they win out and have a ton of help. They need to win this game in order to even think about touching the playoffs. But that's not even possible now. Honestly, this felt like for the Jets kind of a winnable game after how the Colts had come into this game feeling a bit 2 losses in a row. With Joe Flacco at the helm, and then Anthony Richardson comes in, and like he said after the game that this kind of helped him clear his head and make him think differently about things. It showed. Like he wasn't always the best or the most, he wasn't the most accurate or anything. He was 20-30 for 272 yards and a touchdown. I mean, it's not awful stats, but still he wasn't perfect. But still, like this definitely was a much better game than what you've seen for him in weeks past, and why he got benched against the Texans. So very good look for Richardson. Aaron Rodgers didn't have a bad game himself. 22 of 29 for 184 yards and 2 touchdowns. Um, Looking at the stats, the Colts did lose the turnover battle, but they won it in the other aspects: total yards, first downs. They edged the time of possession battle. So in a lot of ways, they did win it, but it was such a good game, and probably one of the best, more surprising games of the week, on how good it was, back and forth. That's kind of what you want NFL football to be, honestly. So good job for Anthony Richardson keeping Colts in the playoff hunt. Um, Jets season probably over at this point. As disappointing as it is for Jets fans who had a lot of expectations coming into this season, and now it's yet another season where they just fall off. Vikings Titans, kind of a very nondescript game. Vikings, I don't think, besides trailing 3-0 at the beginning of the game, they never trailed. Defense was very good. Offense was also pretty good for the most part. Sam Darnold had a pretty good bounce back game after kind of an ugly game against the Jaguars last week. 246 yards and 2 touchdowns. While Will Levis had 295 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. Will Levis was also the leading rusher with 7 carries for 18 yards. Just showed how much the Vikings defense thrived against the Titans' rushing attack. Both teams had turnover apiece. Overall, though, the Vikings just dominated this game from the start after going down 3-0. And improved to 8-2. They are the 5th seed in the conference NFC at this point. Titans their season's pretty much over at 2-8 as well. The Vikings. It's crazy that an 8-2 team is a 5 seed in the NFC, and that's because they are behind one of the more dominant teams of the year, the Lions, who are 9-1, and beat these Vikings by a point. It's just crazy to think about, and that 8-2 team is a 5 seed, and I mean it hasn't been the prettiest lately. The Lions beat them by 2 points. It hasn't been the prettiest for the Vikings lately, but still, I mean they've got the job done, and I think that's kind of how they want it to be this year, particular while waiting for JJ McCarthy to get better. They've shown the flashes of potential that this team can be great defense with an offense that can get hot and control the clock and just manage a game very well overall. Coach who is solid against his quarterbacks. So yeah, it's a very solid win. When obviously the Vikings need to keep themselves at the top of the wild card spots, and they did that. They keep themselves a game ahead of the Packers. Let's get to the Packers, by the way. The Packers were down 19-13 with 19-14 actually, with 31 seconds to go in the third quarter, and no one could get anything going until Jordan Love got a 1-yard rushing touchdown after a great play to set them up by Christian Watson, catch that got him like 60 yards, I think it was, and then Jordan Love gets the touchdown with 2:59 to go. Bears have plenty of time, drive down to get the game-winning field goal, and it's blocked. And that's just the most Bears thing to ever happen, honestly. And you have to feel so frustrated if you're the Bears. Because, this game was in their grasp for the vast majority of it. They had the lead. They dominated a lot of the stats. Keenan Allen and DeAndre Swift had some games. For the most part, Bears barely outgained the Packers. Packers lost the turnover battle. Bears dominated the time of possession, had more first downs. This just felt like a game the Bears were destined to win. And, 19-14, and then, the Packers get a good touchdown drive that was helped by a huge pass play. And the Bears are just left wondering, what in the world did we do to deserve this? And they're 4-6 now. Their season's almost over at this point. The Packers are 7-3, game back with the Vikings for the 5th seed in the playoffs, while, looking up at the Lions, who are 2 games ahead of them, plus the tiebreaker. So, yeah, this just feels very anticlimactic for the Bears, and as a Packers fan, you gotta be very relieved. The Packers, I'm sure, are also relieved that they got this kind of a win. Um, and it keeps their playoff hopes alive. You know, they're a game ahead of the seventh seed in the NFC, which is, I believe, no, it's the Commanders. They're a game ahead of the Commanders now for the sixth seed. So each of the wildcard teams are a game ahead of each other, which is kind of interesting. So that might actually be a playoff race to look at. Seven seed races are always fun when it gets to this time of year. Raiders Dolphins kind of was a nothing, but the Dolphins dominated this game for the most part. There was a time it looked like the Raiders might keep it close. It was 17-12 at one point before the Raiders got poured on to make it 24-12. And then they got Amir Abdullah 10-yard touchdown pass for Gardner Minshew, making a 5-point game again. Then the Dolphins just poured it on and held on to make it 34-19 final. Tua had a very good game with 288 yards and 3 touchdowns. Devon Achane had 73 yards and a touchdown. Jonnu Smith had a breakout game, 101 yards and 2 touchdowns for the tight end. Yeah, this was a game that never felt close. Even the scoreboard indicated it. Dolphins, for the most part, just dominated the game. Time of and total yards, they won the turnover battle. Had more first downs, and the time of possession was theirs. Overall, it was good, solid performance, and this shows, kind of what the Dolphins wanted to be at the beginning of the season. It just never fully materialized. And I mean, I think they're 4-6 now. I mean, it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility. I believe right now, they're actually the 9th seed ahead of the Bengals. We'll get to it in a little bit. But, slowly but surely actually pulling themselves into this race. I think they're a game and a half back in the Broncos at this point, which is interesting. We'll have to definitely keep an eye on that. Watch the Dolphins somehow sneak into this. I mean, if they keep this up, they very well might. Um, Broncos Falcons was a very interesting game. Broncos coming into this want to keep their playoff hopes. Both teams want to keep their playoff hopes alive. Falcons after a loss to the Saints last week, and the Broncos after a loss to the Chiefs on a blocked field goal. The Falcons, holding the division lead, wanted to get further solidity on that, considering the Bucks and the Saints are both faltering. But they did get it, and the Falcons just got absolutely blasted into another dimension by the Broncos, 38-6. And this just never, ever, ever, ever felt close. By the time it was the end of the first half, it was 21-6, and that was off. The Falcons only had 2 field goals, and yeah, Kirk Cousins had a pick. Bo Nix solidified his Rookie of the Year candidacy with 370 yards and 4 touchdowns. This is on a Falcons defense that was pretty solid for the most part to start the year. Very solid secondary pieces, and just never ever materializing so far. Not materializing so far this year. Now 2 straight losses to the Saints, and now the Broncos, who keep themselves very much in the playoff game ahead of the Colts and a game and a half ahead of the Dolphins. Broncos put up 400 total yards of offense, no turnovers. This just shows how good their defense is, man. Like, they can put clamps on pretty much anybody and make any team look bad on their day. And that's why that Ravens loss a few weeks ago was so disappointing, because that really could have announced their arrival back into this, and Broncos might have finally found a competent quarterback. Who knows? We'll definitely have to see. It's very interesting to see the rebound the Broncos have taken, and good for them. Like, they've had so much weird stuff go on with them lately in terms of quarterbacks. So, very, very good to see in that respect, and keeps their playoff hopes alive. Meanwhile, the Falcons, they have not lost the division lead. They're up by 2 games on the Bucks, who are the nearest contender for the division. Otherwise, it was It's the Saints and the Panthers who are both 3 and 4 games ahead back of the Falcons respectively. Um, 2 and 3 actually, 2 and 3 games back. But still, it doesn't feel like they're going to be much of a threat. And yeah, so it doesn't lose them ground to the division, and they're still the 4 seed. But still, it feels like a massive turn of momentum that they didn't take advantage of a game they should have won. They might have, a lot of people might have thought they should have won, and they didn't against a good Broncos defense that might show, their flaws come playoff time. Seahawks 49ers, this kind of felt like a get right game for the 49ers at home against a division rival they beat comfortably in Seattle on Thursday night a few weeks ago. But instead, um, they had the lead with 9:33 to go in the game, 17-13 off of a Juwan Jennings 3-yard touchdown pass and 3-yard touchdown catch by and throw from Purdy. And then with 12 seconds to go, Geno Smith hits a 13-yard run for a touchdown. They go up 20-17. Seahawks have a clutch drive, and yeah, it stuns the 49ers and gives the Seahawks a crucial tiebreaker going into the latter part of the season now, and in terms of NFC playoffs. Because now, with that, all of a sudden both teams are 5-5. The news coming into this game was George Kittle was out for this game with a hamstring. I think there's someone else on the 49ers that was out for this game. And it felt weird because like the Niners felt like they dominated the vast majority of this game, and like they both each had a turnover. Niners dominated the time of possession, had more first downs, but the Seahawks actually had more total yards. Jackson Smith and Jigba had a game, 10 catches for 110 yards. Kenneth Walker, hasn't he hasn't done much since his rookie year last year. 14 carries, 50 yards, 54 yards and a touchdown. Juwan Jennings had a good game, 10 catches for 91 yards and a touchdown for the 49ers. McCaffrey, his second game back, I think his first home game, 19 carries for 79 yards. So, I mean, it's not bad. I mean, Geno, he didn't have any touchdowns himself. 221 yards and a pick. Kenneth Walker had the only touchdown in the game until Geno Smith's touchdown run at the end of the game. So, yeah, you might say this is very fortunate that, like, the Niners are extremely unlucky because of all the injuries they've had on defense and offense, too. It just feels like almost a lost year at this point. I mean, I can't say that because, like, Niners are they have one of the better rosters when healthy in this league. Right now, they are 10th in the 10th seed. And the Seahawks hold the tiebreaker over the Niners because of a win-to-win, head-to-head, and also a better divisional record in, which is kind of interesting, as well. Actually, ESPN has listed as the 9th seed, the Seahawks listed as the 9th seed because of a better divisional record. Niners actually have a 1-3 record in the division, which is something they haven't had to bother about the last few years. Now all of a sudden, that's a real problem. They're 3-4 actually in the conference. The Seahawks are 2-4 in the conference. Seahawks also, of course, now have the head-to-head tiebreaker, and that actually puts the Niners back in 4th place. I think it is in the division, which is really weird to say. Talking about a team that went to the Super Bowl last year. Yeah, it's such a weird year. And they're both now a game back because of all this. The Cardinals are just sitting back and enjoying it. They enjoy their bye week because now they're a game ahead of everybody in the division, plus a very good 2-0 divisional record. Ironically enough, I think the Cardinals face the Seahawks next week, so that's going to be a very interesting matchup in terms of playoffs and seeding and all that. Because a win, actually, I think, put the Seahawks. Well, no, it would put the Seahawks in the division lead because they'd be 2-2, and the Cardinals would be 2-1 in the division. So depending on if the Rams win, let's just say the Rams win, the Cardinals lose, the Seahawks, the Rams would get first place, and then Cardinals will still be second place though in the division, based on division record. So very interesting kind of scenario now to look at. Niners just need to regroup. Um, you can't count them out. This is a team that's so good when they're healthy. They have the Packers, they have the Bills, and then they have the Bears and the Rams, Dolphins, Lions, and Cardinals to end the year. Not an easy schedule ever, but it's winnable. If they can find their group somehow, they might be able to sneak into the playoffs. And you definitely don't want to face this team when they get in the playoffs because they could get hot, and when they are hot, they are very good. So, but right now it stands to be a huge loss for the Niners and a very good win for the Seahawks to keep themselves right in the thick of it in the playoff hunt. I believe, yeah, right now they are a game back a game and a half back of the playoff seed, the 7th playoff seed, which is held by the Commanders. We did have our first undefeated lose this year. Our final undefeated lose. Chiefs fell to the Bills 30-21. This was a game that started off with an interception by Patrick Mahomes, and he looked very good after that. Honestly, 3 touchdowns. He did have another pick actually this game. 3 touchdowns, 2 picks, but overall, I mean, he was very much constantly under pressure. Josh Allen wasn't. That was kind of the story of this game. Josh Allen was able to do a lot because he wasn't under pressure. And the Bills just kept finding ways to score. Chiefs kept finding ways to answer, but never could exactly find the final edge to kind of take control of the game from the Bills. And the Bills, for another time in the regular season, beat the Chiefs to improve to 9-2. Chiefs fall to 2-1, 10-1 to 9-1. The Bills did win the time of possession battle, a turnover battle. They outgained the Chiefs. And it does feel like the Chiefs have a bit of an O-line problem. Um, that if Mahomes has a slightly better O-line, this offense might actually be a lot better. So who knows? They might actually go and sign a tackle like Donovan Smith. I think that has kind of been tossed around as an option. So we'll have to see about that. They do go to Carolina, so that feels like a bounce back game for the Chiefs. The Bills have a harder schedule. This does feel like though it feels like even if it was a 30-21 loss, it felt close. It didn't feel like the Chiefs were miles off of this game. And honestly, a few other plays go the Chiefs' way. This is probably a Chiefs win, but at the same time, the Bills did beat them, and it was a good, solid win for the Bills to improve their chances at the 1 seed. They're still a game back of the Chiefs. They have a pretty hard schedule, but Chiefs ground on the 1 seed streaks, and now they have to defend it. It's going to be very interesting to see how it pans out because both teams have very tough schedules coming up to finish the season. But yeah, the Bills played very well. Josh Allen, once again showing he might be an MVP. He's very much an MVP candidate this year. Even if he was pretty much the entire offense with Keon Coleman and Dawson Knox. And, well, Keon Coleman and Dalton Kincaid were both ruled out at the beginning of the game. And Dawson Knox picked up an injury in this game, as did Deion Dawkins. But this is going to be interesting for the number 1 seed in the AFC race. That'll be, I think, coming out of the wire probably. But yeah, very solid win for the Bills. Kind of a loss that doesn't take anything away from the Chiefs because it feels like they still are a very good team. They just have a couple of improvements to make, and they would probably be pretty good. after that. And that's the good thing about teams like the Chiefs. Like, it doesn't need much, and I think they know that. And they know they can get better. And, like, afterwards, the Chiefs were talking about how they need to use it as a spark, and they want to remember the feeling that this loss gave them. So those are very encouraging signs for the Chiefs as well. Yeah, that race is going to be fun for the number one seed. Bengals Chargers, one of the more fun games of the week. One of the more chaotic ones. Chargers went up 27-6, I believe it was, in this game. 27-6 in the third quarter. And then the Bengals put on a masterclass once again, just showing how good this offense can be. And the defense clamped up, and they got him. With 12:21, they got the tying touchdown to make it 27-all. With 12:21 to go, and then came a defensive slugfest. So J.K. Dobbins found the end zone with 18 seconds to go after the Bengals pinned them inside the Chargers inside their own 16. After two huge pass plays to Lad McConkey, they got inside the Bengals 35, and then from there, J.K. Dobbins just put on a great touchdown run to practically seal the game for the Chargers, and fell the Bengals to 4-7. This was a Bengals team coming into the year that just you knew that if Joe Burrow was healthy, they would be in playoff contention. Like, that's kind of just been the trendy pick that the Bengals would finally win a Super Bowl ever since 2021 when they didn't make it but lost to the Rams. Instead, they just haven't been able to find it this year. Their defense just let them down in a lot of ways. They had to make such a big comeback to even be in this game. And the Chargers almost blew it, but they didn't. And that's huge credit to Jim Harbaugh and his coaching staff. I mean, because previous years, Chargers teams would have blown it for sure. And you've got to be very impressed with how they took charge at the end and made sure that they didn't blow it like past teams. And hats off to them for that. Justin Herbert played a whale of a game, 297 yards and 2 touchdowns. Joe Burrow once again flashing his what are very much MVP numbers, 356 yards and 3 touchdowns. Joe Burrow right now, you've got to feel bad for him. He's got 27 touchdowns, 4 picks on 3,028 yards passing. That's just insane. I mean, his completion percentage is not that great, actually, if you look at it. Only 56%. That's kind of surprising, honestly. 84.2 QBR is not awful, but still 56% completion percentage is kind of interesting, to look at. But yeah, Chargers, they are very much in the playoff hunt this year. They are the 5th seed as a result of all of the losses and wins this week, because of the Ravens loss and the Broncos still being at 5 losses. This gives them a healthy game lead over the 1-game lead of the Ravens, and yeah, they needed this win because otherwise they would have slipped down. And I think they might have been very susceptible to being caught by other playoff teams. And the Bengals might have been one of those teams if they had won. But instead, the Bengals just have so many problems, man. They have problems like on defense, consistently giving up big plays. They sat Cam Taylor-Britt for this game for DJ Turner, who broke his collarbone in this game. It had to be replaced again. And yeah, it just, you gotta feel bad for the Bengals because that was just a heartbreaking way to end. And once again, that's kind of the story of their season, just losses like that all the time. Very much 2010 Bengals-esque type matchup and result for what was a very 2010s finish for the Bengals. It just feels very brutal, and it almost feels like their season is pretty much over unless they absolutely win out and get tons of help, which they have some winnable games, but they also have some very tough ones for them. They have not yet won against a team with a winning record, and I don't see that changing, honestly, unless something drastic changes. And it doesn't sound like Zach Taylor is very keen on changing anything right now. He said in his press conference after that he's not going to change anything much, and I think that's a mistake. Yeah, this feels like if Zach Taylor doesn't make the playoffs, he's either fired. And if he's kept for another year, that could very much test the patience of a lot of fans, as there's been a lot of calls for his head because of how poorly the season has gone. So yeah, Bengals season's pretty much hanging by a thread. Charger season very much alive. They look like they could be back in the playoffs for the first time in I think 2 or 3 years. So good for them, honestly. Um, 2 years actually, it'd be 2 years since they blew that lead to the Jaguars in the wild card game a couple years ago. Texans Cowboys Monday night was a very ugly game. Not the prettiest game you'll ever see, but Texans did pull it out. Joe Mixon went off in this game for 3 touchdowns on 190 yards on only 20 carries. This Cowboys team, like, they kept themselves in it for a large stretch of it. Um, and we get to the second half, they were only down by 7, but they just couldn't find offense. And this game started out very bizarrely as well as they both traded picks. Both teams traded interceptions, and the Cowboys were able to drive on the Texans. They just couldn't do anything about it. And honestly, you feel like if Dak had been in this game, Cowboys actually might have a shot winning this game. But yeah, the Texans should feel very lucky that they, yeah, you just look at this, like, the stats kind of show the Cowboys were not, like, massively outplayed. Even though the score looks like it did, they did. The final score is 34-10, by the way. Um, Texans only outgained the Cowboys by 3 total yards of offense. 391 for the Texans to 388 for the Cowboys. The Texans did win the turnover battle, which I think is probably the deciding factor of this game. Um, the Cowboys had more first downs. Texans barely entered the time of possession battle at 30 minutes and 37 seconds to 29 minutes and 23 seconds for the Cowboys. So this didn't feel like it was a game that was far out of reach. And, I mean, that's kind of surprising considering how the Cowboys have played lately, but it feels like a lot of it might be due to injury. And if it is, that's huge. But at the same time, like, the defense has not been up to par this year for the Cowboys at all. The offense has not been the main problem. This year it's been, well, it kind of had, it was with Dak, but it wasn't like a massive, big problem as it is now, because with Cooper Rush, it's pretty much a liability. And with a defense as bad as the Cowboys is, you're not going to have much room of margin to kind of base that off of. So yeah, very hard night for the Cowboys. Texans do get a win to stay, above ground for the division race with the Colts just breathing down their neck now, only 2 games back. Somehow the Texans still in the division. Um, yeah, 2 games back. Um, but they've already played the Colts twice, so they don't have the Texans have. So I don't think. I mean, they have. It'll be very interesting to see what happens the rest of the season because like they have some tough games. Not too many, but enough to maybe give them a little scare. If I'm the Texans, I'm kind of worried because they haven't exactly played well recently. They had that game against the Lions last week. This really doesn't instill a ton of confidence in me that they can really that there's a lot's changed since Nico Collins came back even this week. I mean, like they gained a lot of offensive yards, but like couldn't do a ton with it until the very end of the game. Um, yeah, this just feels like a something to keep an eye on for the Texans because the passing game is not fully seeked up this year, and CJ Stroud hasn't felt like his stuff from last year. So just something to keep an eye on with the Texans. Just do they improve at all? Considering they have the Titans, Jags, and Dolphins before they're beat up with the Chiefs and Arrowhead, that's going to be a very interesting question to answer with those 3 games. Games that they should win and maybe somewhat comfortably. So yeah, they might be one of the weaker playoff sides coming into this playoff hunt, but you never know. a team can always get hot and absolutely take off in the playoffs. That's the beauty of it, for sure. So yeah, concerned, but definitely a good win for the Texans to stay, 7-4, top of the division by 2 games. The Cowboys, their season's pretty much over at this point. At 3-8, I believe it is. Yeah, it feels like it's pretty much over with the Cowboys this year, and after a 7th straight loss, which is crazy. Um, yeah, they're 3-7 actually. They start out 3-0 and go to 3-7 on a 7th straight loss. Wait, no, that can't be right. They have lost 1, 2, 3, 4. They've lost 5 straight. Yeah, never mind. They've only lost 5 straight. I'm thinking Saints, who lost 7 straight. But yeah, this is a huge loss for the Cowboys, and it feels like their season's practically over at this point, which, is a massive disappointment for any year for the Cowboys, because that franchise is always thinking Super Bowl at best. And Jerry Jones definitely hasn't helped matters this year in that regard in terms of contending, which is, I'm sure for a lot of fans, very disappointing. So yeah, that's your Gritside recap for the week. Very, very packed action. Lots of tight games where a lot of seasons were in the balance. A lot of teams fighting for them playoff wise or improving their position. Here, week 11, we've only got 7 weeks to go before the playoff race is decided, which is really cool. So we're going to have a lot more games like this coming up. So definitely stay tuned for us as we keep track of the season throughout the weeks. Thank you so much for tuning in. We would greatly appreciate it. Please give us a like and subscribe on YouTube via Amazon Music or Apple Podcasts or wherever you get podcasts. Spotify. We always appreciate a follow and a listen, and any streams or likes or comments are greatly appreciated. We also are on Facebook and TikTok and Instagram, so please give us a follow and a like, and also on Twitter and Blue Sky as well. Blue Sky is kind of becoming a pretty popular thing these days. So give us a follow on all the socials. We will be posting those. Have a great rest of your week. We'll see you in a few days to preview the Week 12 action and see what next twists and turns are coming up. Plus, we get EFL back, which is always fun. So we're going to see a full range of action after the international break is over this coming weekend. So we have a lot to look forward to. Have a good rest of your week, and we'll see you soon for the preview episode.